Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Western Canon Challenge, where we are reading the entirety of the Western literary canon out loud. Today we are continuing in Life with Father by Clarence Day. We are on the story entitled Father Tries to Make Mother Like Figures. Father was always trying to make Mother keep track of the household expenses. He was systematic by nature, and he had had a sound business training. He had a full set of account books at home in addition to those in his office, a personal cash book, journal, and ledger, in which he carefully made double entries. His home ledger showed at a glance exactly how much a month or a year his clothes or his clubs or his cigar bills amounted to. Every item was listed. He knew just how every one of his expenses compared with those of former years, and when he allowed the figures to mount up in one place, he could bring them down in another. Before he got married, these books had apparently given him great satisfaction, but he said they were never the same after that. They had suddenly stopped telling him anything. He still knew what his personal expenses were, but they were microscopic compared to his household expenses, and of those he knew nothing. No details, only the horrible total. His money was flowing away in all directions, and he had no record of it. Every once so often he tried to explain his system to Mother, but his stout leather-bound ledgers and his methodical ruling of lines in red ink and the whole business of putting down every little expense every day were too much for her. She didn't feel that women should have anything to do with accounts, any more than men should have to see that the parlor was dusted. She had been only a debutante when she married, not long out of school, and though she had been head of her class, and wrote well, and spelled well, and spoke beautiful French, she had never laid eyes on a ledger. Every time Father showed her his, she was unsympathetic. Figures were so absorbing to Father that for a long time he couldn't believe Mother really disliked them. He hoped for years that her lack of interest was due only to her youth, and that she would outgrow it. He said confidently that she would soon learn to keep books. It was simple. Meanwhile, if she would just make a memorandum for him of whatever she spent, he would enter it himself in the accounts until he could trust her to do it. That day never arrived. Father knew where some of the money went, for part of the expenses were charged, but this was a poor consolation. Although the household bills gave him plenty of data which he could sit and stare at in horror, he said that many of the details were not clear to him, and most the rest were incredible. He tried to go over the bills regularly with Mother, as well as he could, demanding information about items which he did not understand. But every now and then there were items that she didn't understand either. She said she wasn't sure they were mistakes, but she couldn't remember about them. Her mind was a blank. She behaved as though the bill were a total stranger to her. This was one of the features that annoyed Father most. Mother didn't like these sessions a bit. She told us she hated bills anyhow. When they were larger than she expected, she felt guilty and hardly dared to let Father see them. When some of them seemed small to her, she felt happy, but not for long because they never seemed small to Father. And when she spotted an error, when she found, for instance, that Tyson the butcher had charged too much for a broiler, she had to fly around the shop to have it corrected, and argue it out and go through a disagreeable experience. And then when she told Father how hard she worked, he took it as a matter of course, and she indignantly found that she never got any credit for it. Sometimes I had to do this kind of thing, too. There was a man named Flanagan over on 6th Avenue who supplied us with newspapers, and I used to be sent to rebuke him when he overcharged. Father said Flanagan had no head for figures. After checking up the addition and recomputing the individual items, he would generally discover that the bill was anywhere from 3 to 14 cents out. He then sent for me, handed me the correct amount of change and the bill, and told me to go over to see Flanagan the next day, after school, and warn him that we wouldn't stand it. I got used to this after a while, but the first time I went I was frightened. Flanagan was a large man who looked like a barkeeper, and whose face was tough and belligerent. When I marched into his dark little shop and shakily attempted to warn him that we wouldn't stand it, he leaned over the counter, stared down at me, and said loudly, "Har?" "Excuse me, Mr. Flanagan," I repeated. "Here is your bill, but it's wrong." "Har?" "It seems to be just a little wrong, sir. 8 cents too much for the sun." Flanagan snatched the bill from me and the money and went to his desk. After working over it with a thick pencil and smudging the bill all up, front and back, he snarled to himself and reseated it the way Father wished. Then he chucked it disdainfully on the counter. I picked it up and got out. "Confound it all," Father said when he got it. "Don't muss my bills up so." "It was Mr. Flanagan, Father." "Well, tell him he must learn to be tidy." "Yes, sir," I said hopelessly. I liked figures myself, just as Father did, and I thought it was queer Mother didn't. She was as quick at them as anybody, yet she didn't get any fun out of writing them down and adding them up. I liked the problems in my school arithmetic, and I deeply admired Father's account books. I didn't dare tell him this somehow. He never offered to let me examine those big, handsome books. He kept them locked up in a desk he had down in the front basement. If I showed Father one of my arithmetic lessons, he was interested. He got up from his chair and put down his newspaper and sat at the dining room table with a pencil and paper to see how well I had done. But Mother didn't want to go into such matters. Every month when the bills came in, there was trouble. Mother seemed to have no great extravagances, but she loved pretty things. She had a passion for china, for instance. She saw hundreds of beautiful cups and saucers that it was hard to walk away from and leave. She knew she couldn't buy them and mustn't, but every so often she did. No one purchase seemed large by itself, but they kept mounting up, and Father declared that she bought more china than the Windsor Hotel. Father couldn't see why charge accounts should be a temptation to Mother. They were no temptation to him. He knew that the bill would arrive on the first of the month, and that in a few days he would pay it. He said he had supposed that Mother would have the same feelings that he had about this. But Mother was one of those persons for whom charge accounts were invented. She bought something and charged it. The first of the next month seemed far away, and she hoped that perhaps Father wouldn't mind. He might be nice about it for once. Her desire for the thing was strong at that moment. The penalty was remote, and she fell. She was a different woman entirely when she had to pay cash. It was hard to get cash out of Father. She never got much at one time, and as she looked in her pocketbook, she could see her precious little hoard dwindling. She fingered a purchase and thought twice about it before she could bear to part with the money. But shopping on a charge account was fun. She tried not to let herself be tempted, but of course she was all the time, and after she had conscientiously resisted 9 lovely temptations, it didn't seem really wicked to yield to the 10th. Father did his level best to take all the fun out of it for her. Once every month, regularly, he held court, and sat as a judge and required her to explain her crimes and misdemeanors. When she cried or showed that she was hurt, it appeared that Father too felt hurt and worried. He said again and again at the top of his voice that he wished to be reasonable, but that he couldn't afford to spend money that way, and that they would have to do better. Once in a while, when Father got low in his mind and said that he was discouraged, Mother felt so sorry that she tried to keep count of the cash for him. She put down all sorts of little expenses on backs of envelopes or on half sheets of letter paper of different sizes, and she gave these to Father with many interlineations and much scratching out of other memoranda, and with mystifying omissions. He would pore over them, calling out to her to tell him what this was or that, in a vain attempt to bring order out of this feminine chaos. Mother could sometimes, though not very often, be managed by praise, but criticism made her rebellious, and after a dose of it she wouldn't put down any figures at all for a while. She had to do the mending and marketing and take care of the children, and she told Father she had no time to learn to be a bookkeeper too. What was the use of keeping track of anything that was over and done with? She said that wasn't her way of doing things. "Well," Father said patiently, "let's get at the bottom of this now, and work out some solution. What is your way of doing things? Tell me." Mother said firmly that her way was to do the very best she could to keep down expenses, and that all her friends thought she did wonderfully, and the Wards spent twice as much. Father said, "Damn the Wards. They don't have to work for it. I don't wish to be told what they spend or how they throw money around." Mother said, "Oh, Claire, how can you? They don't. They just like to have things go nicely and live in a comfortable way. And I thought you were so fond of Cousin Mary. You know very well she is lovely, and she gave the baby a cup." Father declared that he might be fond of Cousin Mary without wanting to hear so damned much about her. He said she cropped up every minute. "You talk of your own family enough," Mother answered. Father felt this was very unjust. When he talked of his own family, he criticized them, and as severely as he knew how. He held tightly onto himself in an effort to keep to the subject. He said that the point he was trying to make was that Cousin Mary's ways were not his ways, and that consequently there was no use whatever discussing them with him. Mother said, "Goodness knows I don't want to discuss things. It's always you who are doing it. And if I can't even speak of Cousin Mary—" "You can speak of her all you want to," Father hotly protested. "But I won't have Cousin Mary or anyone else dictating to me how to run things." "I didn't say a word about her dictating, Claire. She isn't that kind." "I don't know what you said now," Father replied. "You never stick to the point. But you implied in some way that Cousin Mary—" "Oh, Claire, please, I didn't. And I can't bear to have you talk so harshly of her when she admires you so." Something like this happened to every financial conversation they had. Father did his best to confine the discussion to the question at issue, but somehow, no matter how calmly he started, he soon got exasperated and went galloping fiercely off in any direction Mother's mind happened to take, and in the middle of it one of the babies would cry, and Mother would have to go off to see what was wrong, or she would have to run down to leave word for Mrs. Tobin, the washerwoman, to do Father's shirts differently, and when Father complained, Mother reminded him reproachfully that she had to keep house. Father was baffled by these tactics, but every time he went back down to the basement and ruled neat lines in his ledgers, he made up his mind all over again that he wouldn't give up. Father and his hard rocking ship. Father said that one great mystery about the monthly household expenses was that what made them jump up and down so. Anyone would suppose that there would be some regularity after a while, which would let a man try to make plans, but I never know from one month to another what to expect. Mother said she didn't either. Things just seemed to go that way. "But they have no business to go that way, Vinny," Father declared. "And what's more, I won't allow it." Mother said she didn't see what she could do about it. All she knew was that when the bills mounted up, it didn't mean that she had been extravagant. "Well, it certainly means that you've spent a devil of a lot of money," said Father. Mother looked at him obstinately. She couldn't exactly deny this, but she said that it wasn't fair. Appearances were often hopelessly against Mother, but they never daunted her. She wasn't afraid of Father or anybody. She was a woman of great spirit, who would have flown and pecked at any tyrant. It was only when she had a bad conscience that she had no heart to fight. Father had the best of her there because he never had a bad conscience, and he didn't know that he was a tyrant. He regarded himself as a long-suffering man who asked little of anybody and who showed only the greatest moderation in his encounters with unreasonable beings like Mother. Mother's one advantage over him was that she was quicker. She was particularly elusive when Father was trying to hammer her into shape. When the household expenses shot up very high, Father got frightened. He would then, as Mother put it, yell his head off. He always did some yelling anyhow, merely on general principles, but when his alarm was genuine, he roared in real anguish. Usually this brought the total down again, at least for a while, but there were times when no amount of noise seemed to do any good, and when every month for one reason or another the total went on up and up. And then just as Father had almost resigned himself to this awful outgo, and just as he had eased up on his yelling and had begun to feel grim, the expenses, to his utter amazement, would take a sharp drop. Mother didn't keep track of these totals. She was too busy watching small details, and Father never knew whether to tell her the good news or not. He always did tell her, because he couldn't keep things to himself, but he always had cause to regret it. When he told her, he did it in as disciplinary a manner as possible. He didn't congratulate her on the expenses having come down. He appeared at her door, waving the bills at her with a threatening scowl, and said, "I told you again and again that you could keep the expenses down if you tried, and this shows I was right." Mother was always startled at such attacks, but she didn't lose her presence of mind. She asked how much less the amount was, and said it was all due to her good management, of course, and Father ought to give her the difference. At this point, Father suddenly found himself on the defensive, and the entire moral lecture he had intended to deliver was wrecked. The more they talked, the clearer it seemed to Mother that he owed her that money. Only when he was lucky could he get out of her room without paying it. He said that this was one of the things about her that was enough to drive a man mad. The other thing was her lack of system, which was always cropping up in new ways. He sometimes looked at Mother as though he had never seen her before. "Upon my soul," he said, "I almost believe you don't know what system is. You don't even want to know either." He had at last invented what seemed a perfect method of recording expenses. Whenever he gave any money to Mother, he asked her what it was for, and made a note of it in his pocket notebook. His idea was that these items, added to those in the itemized bills, would show him exactly where every dollar had gone. But they didn't. He consulted his notebook. "I gave you $6 in cash on the 25th of last month," he said, "to buy a new coffee pot." "Yes," Mother said, "because you broke your old one. You threw it right on the floor." Father frowned. "I'm not talking about that," he answered. "I am simply endeavoring to find out from you, if I can—" "But it's so silly to break a nice coffee pot, Claire, and that was the last of those French ones. And there was nothing the matter with the coffee that morning. It was made just the same as it always is." "It wasn't," said Father. "It was made in a damned barbaric manner." "And I couldn't get another French one," Mother continued, "because that little shop the Offmorts told us about has stopped selling them. They said the tariff wouldn't let them any more. And I told Monsieur Duval he ought to be ashamed of himself to stand there and say so. I said that if I had a shop, I'd like to see the tariff keep me from selling things." "But I gave you $6 to buy a new pot," Father firmly repeated, "and now I find that you apparently got one at Lewis and Conger's and charged it. Here's the bill. One brown earthenware drip coffee pot, $5. "So I saved you $1, Mother triumphantly said, "and you can hand it right over to me." "Bah! What nonsense you talk!" Father cried. "Is there no way to get things straightened out? What did you do with the $6? "Why, Claire, I can't tell you now, dear. Why didn't you ask at the time?" "Oh, my God!" Father groaned. "Wait a moment," said Mother. "I spent $4.50 for that new umbrella I told you I wanted, and you said I didn't need a new one, but I did very much." Father got out his pencil and wrote, "New umbrella for V," in his notebook. "And that must have been the week," Mother went on, "that I paid Mrs. Tobin for 2 extra days' washing, so that was $2 more out of it, which makes it $6.50. There's another 50 cents that you owe me." "I don't owe you anything," Father said. "You have managed to turn a coffee pot for me into a new umbrella for you. No matter what I give you money for, you buy something else with it, and if this is to keep on, I might as well not keep account books at all." "I'd like to see you run this house without having any money on hand for things," Mother said. "I am not made of money," Father replied. "You seem to think I only have to put my hand in my pocket to get some." Mother not only thought this, she knew it. His wallet always was full. That was the provoking part of it. She knew he had the money right there, but he tried to keep from giving it to her. She had to argue it out of him. "Well, you can put your hand in your pocket and give me that $1.50 this minute," she said. "You owe me that anyhow." Father said he didn't have $1.50 to spare, and tried to get back to his desk, but Mother wouldn't let him go till he paid her. She said she wouldn't put up with injustice. Mother said it hampered her dreadfully never to have any cash. She was always having to pay out small amounts for demands that she had forgot to provide for, and in such emergencies the only way to do was to juggle things around. One result, however, of all these more or less innocent shifts was that in this way she usually took care of all her follies herself. All the small ones, at any rate. They never got entered on Father's books, except when they were monstrous. She came home one late afternoon in a terrible state. "Has it come yet?" she asked the waitress. The waitress said nothing had come that she knew of. Mother ran upstairs with a hunted expression and flung herself down on her bed. When we looked in, she was sobbing. It turned out that she had gone to an auction, and she had become so excited that she had bought but not paid for a grandfather's clock. Mother knew in her heart that she had no business going to auctions. She was too suggestible, and if a hypnotic auctioneer once got her eye, she was lost. Besides, an auction aroused all her worst instincts, her combativeness, her recklessness, and her avaricious love of a bargain. And the worst of it was that this time it wasn't a bargain at all. At least, she didn't think it was now. The awful old thing was about 8 feet tall, and it wasn't the one she had wanted. It wasn't half as nice as the clock that old Miss Vanderwent had bought. And inside the hood over the dial she said there was a little ship, which at first she hadn't noticed. A horrid ship that rocked up and down every time the clock ticked. It made her ill just to look at it. And she didn't have the money, and the man said he'd have to send it this evening, and what would Father say? She came down to dinner and left halfway through. Couldn't stand it. But an hour or two later, when the doorbell rang, she bravely went to tell Father. She could hardly believe it, but she found that luck was with her for once. If the clock had come earlier, there might have been a major catastrophe, but Father was in a good mood, and he had had a good dinner. And though he never admitted it or spoke of it, he had a weakness for clocks. There were clocks all over the house which he would allow no one to wind but himself. Every Sunday between breakfast and church, he made the rounds, setting them at the right time by his infallible watch, regulating their speed and telling us about every clock's little idiosyncrasies. When he happened to be coming downstairs on the hour, he cocked his ear, watch in hand, to listen to as many of them as he could, in the hope that they would all strike at once. He would reprove the impulsive pink clock in the spare room for striking too soon, and the big solemn clock in the dining room for being a minute too late. So when Mother led him out in the hall to confess to him and show him what she had bought, and he saw it was a clock, he fell in love with it and made almost no fuss at all. The letdown was too much for Mother. She tottered off to her room without another word, and went straight to bed, leaving Father and the auctioneer's man setting up the new clock alongside the hat rack. Father was especially fascinated by the hard-rocking ship. This is the end of Part 6 of Life with Father by Clarence Day. In the next video, we will continue with Father Has Trouble with the Land of Egypt. Thank you for listening.